Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim. We talk about horror movies on this show, and in this episode we are talking about the film Veronica, which is a Spanish film. It is from one of the two directors of the Wreck movie, or well, I think it did multiple Wreck movies, but certainly of the pair that directed the first one of those guys is directing this. And this is on Netflix, most places now. Netflix put it out. So we thought we'd jump in and do it. Also, it's funny, we said, oh, it'll be a quieter schedule and stuff, and you've not actually missed a week yet of an episode. And honestly, it's looking kind of hopeful that you won't be missing a week the next week either. So, you know.
I think at the worst, maybe might miss a week here or there in the upcoming weeks, but it won't be. I don't think it'll be that bad. At least not as bad as maybe we were originally thinking.
Yeah, the doom and gloom of that first episode, we were like, oh no, we're going to have to be like off for weeks and months at a time, and it's not that at all. It's like the odd week might be missed, but here we are. So so this is going into it, I thought it was a possession film, and that's not entirely accurate. As a film, obviously we'll start spoiler free, and I'll give you a warning in the middle before we get to spoilers. I should always say that before I get to anything. But the general premise is that this girl Veronica uses a Ouija board with two friends at school. So this could almost be like the Spanish Ouija spin-off, if you wanted to go with that. But they use that during an eclipse, and scary things start happening. They seem to be targeting Veronica and her family, and she's kind of this, like, she's only 15 years old, but her mother works all the time. Her dad's passed away, so she's kind of taking care of the younger kids. She's got two little sisters and a little brother, so she's essentially taking on the role of being the mother a lot of the time. Like, she's picking them up from school, she's making sure they get dressed and showered in the morning. She's been very mature in that sense. A lot of responsibility, and scary things start happening, and she has to try and protect the house and the kids, and that's kind of the gist of the film. So so we'll get into it. So Tim, I shall ask the question: did you enjoy Veronica?
Well, yeah, it's not really a big secret because I've been talking about it for the last week or so. Because I think I watched it maybe last Monday or Tuesday, but I absolutely loved this movie. I was pretty surprised because I think it's getting a lot of hype now, but originally I kind of went in not really hearing much about it. I heard a couple of people say oh, there's this pretty good new horror movie, and I was kind of like, whatever, and they're like, oh, it's from one of the guys that did Wreck, so I was like, all right, I'm sold. I watched it, and I think it's really, really good. In terms of plot, it's not really anything special or super unique, but I think this is a great example of in this case, it doesn't really matter. There's just everything is done so well with the tone and just the visuals, and everything is just so creepy, and it gives a really eerie sense about it that I was pretty much hooked pretty early on from it. But yeah, I've been gushing about it for a while though, so I'm interested to see what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a 2017 movie. It came out in Spain in 2017, but it's getting a lot of notability now because it's on Netflix most places, and obviously everyone's starting to talk about it. It's starting to hit everyone else. So how do I feel about it? I don't think I love it quite as much as you do, but I do like it a lot. I think where it falls down for me is I think there's just one or two times where the cliche of what it's doing is a bit much, and also there's one or two times where there's a CG thing on the screen, and I'm just kind of I don't need to see the thing. I'm kind of, I'd prefer if it was more vague and subdued in that sense. However, I do think the direction is very good. I think it's really well handled most of the time. I think Veronica as a character's very likable to get behind because she is taking so much responsibility. So you're kind of rooting for her, and you see how difficult this is. Not only just to take care of three kids, but to do it when you're only 15 and you're not really supposed to have that responsibility yet. You're just kind of shoved into it.
Let alone you get a freaking ghost in the apartment. That doesn't make things easy.
I know, exactly. No, I dug that. And actually, know what my favorite part of the movie might be, Tim?
The music?
Yeah, the music. You know me too well. You know me well.
It was really good. Yeah.
It was very 80s, late 80s, sort of almost Italian horror movie kind of vibe I was getting from the music.
Oh, actually, that's something else I was kind of gonna mention. And this might be a little unfair, but I think if this took place in America, an American cast, like I think my interest would have been way down on it. But just because it is like taking place in Spain, and it's kind of like and yeah, it does take place in the past. I think it was like early 90s,
Yeah,
maybe like
1991, because it's based somewhat on a true story. I mean, I didn't look into it to see how much it was like,
yeah,
accurate. Because we actually, the movie opens with kind of like the end of the incident where the police are showing up at the house, and it kind of like jumps back, and because it keeps telling you the date, because it's like, okay, so it's like the early morning of the 15th of like July or June, whatever the month was, 1991. And then once you see us, you get the tease that something really bad's happening in the house, and then it cuts back, and it's like, oh, okay, the 12th. So it takes place over 3 days, building up to like where it ended.
yeah,
And it says at the start that it was based on the police report that was filed of the detective who went there. So that's obviously interesting, because like, all right, okay, you know they've embellished a lot of the actual story, because they're like, okay, this needs to be an entertaining movie and whatnot. But I was really curious when we got to that moment at the end, finally, when we see like what he sees at the end, because again, that's what the movie sets up at the start, is that he sees something, and we don't get to see what it is till the end. I was very curious, like, okay, so as much as the rest must be embellished, whatever he saw and put in his report, I imagine that's probably the part that's accurate, because that's what it was like. That was the bit that was good enough to like make a movie about it. Like, let's make a movie about this. And it says at one point in the text that this was the first like confirmed, or not confirmed, but the first time an actual police report said something supernatural was happening somewhere, like in the country. So so there's some interesting parts of that. Like I said, I agree that I think having it set somewhere else gave it a little bit of a fresh lick of paint, as opposed to just doing it again in a, oh, it's a house with a picket fence, dad.
Yeah, and it's just nice, and it gives it like a little sense of like, it feels like kind of like more old school, like I don't know, and obviously, it is set like, 20-ish years ago or whatever. So yeah, obviously it is gonna look older, but I don't know. I feel like it lends itself to the story more,
Yeah,
and
the music
felt more
really,
authentic.
yeah, the music really did a lot of that. It really put me in that mood. I wish more scores would sound like this. It was great.
Yeah, it definitely felt like I feel like there is, you can tell like a modern American possession movie versus like this felt like a European like early 90s possession movie, which I think just has like a different feel to it, a different like sound and stuff. And yeah, like the music really reflected that,
And
which was cool.
just of course like simple things in the story. Like there's no like smartphones or anything like that. Everything's of the time, and it means like something as simple as when her mother's working all day, she seems to run this bar. Like she can never just phone her mother for something, or at least if she does, like she's busy. Or more specifically, the mother can't just phone the daughter when like they're walking home from school or anything like that. Because you see her walking her little brothers and sisters home from school or to school, and like, okay, so this is a different time, because they can't be in as contact as easily as often. So
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. It's an interesting. Just the family setup's different than usual, because it's a big sister protecting our little brother and sisters.
Yeah, and it makes it like extra sad too, because it is one of those things which sometimes it can be kind of annoying in movies where you have like some parental figure, or like some other authority figure or something, that whenever they're around, like all the weird stuff stops happening. But it was actually like I thought well done in this movie, where it kind of added this extra layer of like sadness to it, because they're like begging their mom to stay, who it already kind of feels like she's barely there, and then when they really need her, and
I mean,
now they're in a situation where
she needs to pay for 4 kids to eat and whatnot. She's covering a lot of mouths on her own, so she's working a lot of hours. And here's something I like as well. As much as I'm saying they embellish a lot, and I do think it went too far with some of the CG stuff that you start to see at various points. Everything's always kind of from Veronica's perspective, though. I do kind of like that if you look at it from the context of what the mother knows what's going on, that there's so little from her perspective that it makes sense. She doesn't really believe that anything's really happening.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, from the context of what the police report probably said, after the fact, yeah, like from what they would know and what they saw, the movie's probably relatively accurate in that. It's just we get to see a lot of what Veronica actually sees in those last few days, and it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, so it's quite clear that, yeah, like there was nothing in the police report about, oh, she sees a shadowy CGI monster man,
Yeah.
like, you know, in the walls and, you know, whatever else.
I would like if a policeman describes something as CGI. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a simple little translation thing that I kind of like. So her name's
Okay.
Veronica, and I like that our friends shorten her name to Vero, and I thought that was kind
Oh
of
yeah.
cool because we have the name Veronica, right? But no one
Mhm.
would ever shorten it, and I think it's kind of funny that another language might shorten a name that we don't because they just think it sounds cool. Like Vero
Oh
sounds
yeah.
cool for Veronica, you
Yeah,
know.
that's cool.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe they don't shorten Peter to Pete, for example, but we short, you know, they do shorten that. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's cool. I like that. And yeah, like the characters are all pretty likable. Like, you know, her and you know, the kids in it, like they never really felt like kind of annoying, like, you know, actor kids or anything. Like they
Nah,
felt like pretty authentic. Like if they are annoying, it is in like, you know, like a little brother sister kind of way.
yeah, yeah. I think authenticity is the key word you brought up there. They feel really. It does feel like a house that has a bunch of kids in it, and her going around and like waking them all up in the morning, and like, you know, the little ones wet the bed, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
and you know, we go through all this, and I think a big theme of the movie is like her being saddled with too much responsibility before she's ready.
Oh sure.
There's like a running thing. In the movie that she's not started having her period yet, and she's 15, which is obviously notably kind of late.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like she's not ready for all this responsibility, and like I think arguably the movie doesn't really do enough with it to really make it
Yeah.
hit as a
The-
as an analogy, but I think it's trying to do something with that.
Yeah, there was like one scene that it's pretty in your face with that, and that did kind of make me go like, all right, that's enough. We didn't need to see that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that scene in spoilers. Don't you worry. So no, but it's a solid movie. As much as I'm like critiquing little bits of it, in that
Yeah.
I think the complaints I have stop it from being a great movie, but I think it's a pretty solid watch, and I would recommend it to fans of horror movies, especially supernatural horror movies.
And I would say, yeah, maybe it was like kind of the state of mind or whatever I was in when I watched it, but you know, it does the one thing that not many horror movies can do to me at this point, but it did actually kind of like creep me out, like not to the point where, yeah, I've been seeing like articles online and stuff of people saying like, oh, like, you know, viewers have to stop the movie halfway through because it's too scary. It's like, well, come on.
No,
it's
bullshit.
it's not that bad, but like, you know, I was watching it like late at night, really tired, and I was like, oh, like this is like genuinely creepy, which is nice. I don't get that feeling too much.
Like I
anymore.
said, the creepiness kind of lost me when it started doing the CGI stuff.
Yeah,
but
that's fair, but yeah.
But yeah, earlier on there was some good stuff, and I think the biggest asset though is how real the characters are, especially Veronica. I feel that's the big difference between this and some like just random shitty supernatural movie is that
Yeah.
like they feel like real people, and it feels like she's really struggling to deal with what's going on, and that's kind of fascinating. And I like that again. Not a whole lot really happens in terms of over the top stuff. By the time we get to the end of the movie, it's kind of like, okay, there was a natural incline that just sort of like built up to the time where we finally got to the police coming. But there was not like so much that was like, surely you'd have like called people in before now with all this stuff going on. No, there wasn't really enough. It was just enough to make her scared. It was enough to make her question what was going on, but never, you know, super amounts over the top.
Yeah, again, I think it's like really like impressive when, you know, people can, you know, make so much out of so little. But I mean, really, like the best or like scariest horror movies, like a lot of times end up doing that. And I do kind of wonder.
I think that's why it's interesting that when I think it falters is when it starts having CGI, which is when it's going beyond just being a little horror movie. It's doing too much stuff.
I wonder if like that was I wonder if like maybe the studio wanted more of that stuff, or if like the director maybe a couple of times kind of like lost faith in like in the movie and was like, all right, no, we got to put in a big scary thing here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you that there were a few parts that were like a little but it didn't take me out of the movie like that much.
Yeah. So before we get to spoilers, I've got another criticism I want to make though. When I mentioned there was some cliched things, I do think the biggest cliche in the movie is the creepy old woman who knows a lot about all the stuff that's going on and can give us lots of exposition about it.
Definitely fair. I honestly, it didn't bother me though, because it's one of those things where I was like, yeah, kind of a cliche, but I think it's kind of like she looks kind of cool, and it is like weird enough that I'm like, I'll let it go. I'm into the story at this point, so
Yeah. Also, I like the idea because she's a blind nun, and there's a whole thing where there's an eclipse happening. And everyone's like holding stuff up so they can look at the eclipse. And I'm like,
yeah.
she doesn't have to hold up shit. She can look at the eclipse as much as she wants because she's blind. Which someone might tell me that's factually incorrect. Maybe there's reasons why even blind people shouldn't look at the eclipse, but
Sure.
you know, whatever. So no, that was my thing because it got to her and she started like explaining things and like I was like, okay, this is where it's starting to feel like a typical plot. Like up until now, I was thinking maybe they'll do something really different with how they're playing it out. But it wasn't necessarily in the plot necessarily as how they do the things differently.
Yeah, I I feel like maybe like with some of like the horror cliche stuff, I feel like they never go like full tilt into it.
Oh
Where
sure, yeah.
it's like
It's definitely more
it's kind of
subdued
like
than
yeah,
I think a mainstream American movie would have it.
yeah, because like it feels like a mainstream movie or something. They probably would have had like a flashback scene of like her as like a little girl or something,
That's true.
or like
That's true.
after Veronica leaves, then the monster would have come for her and like threw her up in the air or something. So I feel like yeah, there's stuff where they skirt the line, but it's like I can forgive it a little bit more because I feel like they don't lean all the way in when other movies might have.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll give a spoiler warning then. So full spoilers from this point on for Veronica, and yeah. So like I was saying before, I really like the amount that the mother sees and the amount that actually kind of happens in terms of like that can be perceived by anyone who's not Veronica. It's actually not that much until that final night where she finally calls the police, and it all feels kind of like okay, yeah. From their perspective, not a whole lot happened until then. But from Veronica's perspective, she's seen shadowy men and stuff. You mentioned the scene where the period sort of thing went a bit too far. I assume you were talking about the mattress, and when she has her first period, and the blood like goes all the way through the mattress, and she's like trying to
Well,
clean it.
I mean, just like the scene of like the shadow hand like creeping up her and then like
Oh, sure, yeah.
grabbing right over her vagina, then all the blood coming out. It's like
Yeah, that's like a
all right, I
nightmare
get it, I get
nightmare
it.
scene. Then she wakes up and she's had her first period. Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the nose. So well, let's talk about the so the big twist at the end. I said I thought this was a possession movie going in, and then like as I was watching the movie, oh that's not true. It's actually just more of a haunting movie. The twist is actually that it is a possession movie. She doesn't realize that's what's happening. Which I actually kind of liked. I like that revelation that because throughout the movie, like it seems like the ghost is like doing things like it's turning the taps hot so it burns her little brother. It's strangling the sister at one point, and she kind of realizes, wait a minute, that was me the whole time. And there's that, but the first time there's like a real hint of a duplication where it's like an evil version of her. Is that scene where she's like walking down the street and she's kind of miffed at this point, and you see someone else walking the opposite way from behind.
Oh.
I'm like, wait a minute, that looks like her. That's like the same jacket
Yeah.
and the same hair. And then she sort of turns around and looks at her, but the duplicate doesn't. And it's when she like sort of turns back around that the duplicate turns, but she's out of focus, the duplicate. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's her. And that's where it sort of gets your head going. You're like, oh, okay, they're really seeding ideas here.
Was that the same scene where like you start to notice like the other people in the street are like walking backwards?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was like really cool. Just like a real simple but like interesting like visual style to it that you're like, ooh, like
Yeah.
this feels like weird and off, and I like it.
Because that was the thing when she's sort of chasing after the little brother at the end, and she falls and she gets up, and she ends up when she's realizing all this, you see in the mirror like the one that's in the foreground is actually just kind of looking evil, but the one in the mirror is like her, and she's looking terrified at what's happening, and she kind of realizes this, and she actually goes to kill herself to sort of stop it and like stop it from getting her brother, because that was the thing the nun said, oh, you have to protect your siblings, like they'll go after the siblings, and obviously what the cop sees when he comes in is just her like sort of bent over backwards, kind of like screaming, and we see that in the like what's really happening is like the ghost is like in her mouth and but she's bent over like unnaturally backwards, almost Exorcist style, and it's like okay, I'll buy that the detective at least thought he saw that when he walked in the room, and that's the creepy thing. Obviously, the text at the end says that all the cops who went there got kind of sick at first, and then they all got transfers because they didn't want to be around the same location and like all the rest of it, which is all creepy, like cool little creepy stuff. But that was the big thing, and I did like the twist, and because it tied into the idea that she like it was almost like bringing the worst out in her, like maybe this evil version that was doing all these things was kind of like taken from like a subconscious thing that was in there, because there's a few scenes in the film where she's looking out the window to like this apartment across the across the street, and she's seeing this like girl who's maybe a little bit older than her, but it's a young woman who's like dancing to music, and she's on her own. There's no brothers, there's no sisters, there's no parents. She's just on her own, and she can just be happy and be like a free teenager, or maybe like a young woman in this case. But because that's the big thing throughout the movie, she can't go to a party because she has to look after her brothers and sisters. She has to do this, she has to, and she's always like burdened with this responsibility, and she wants to be free. She's almost resentful, even though she does love her brothers and sisters. Yeah. And I think that's the big theme of the movie, is that she ultimately has to like, oh, I need to stop my evil self from doing this. But it's that wanting to be free and wanting to be like the person across the street who has a boyfriend at one point. So I want to be her, and she can, and that's kind of what the ghost is feeding on to do its stuff.
Yeah, like the way I kind of thought about it is it didn't feel like other possession movies where like the ghost is inside your body, like controlling it. Like it almost feels like the ghost was kind of attached to her or something, like by her side, and then like every now and again it would like get control or something.
Either control or trigger like a dark part of herself.
Yeah,
that would do the thing or whatever. Yeah. Which means thematically the idea of it being a shadow makes a lot of sense, because it's like her dark shadow, but it just was this CGI thing that I thought looked kind of over the top and goofy as it was actually happening. Oh, not all the time. Yeah. There was times where it kind of worked, where the shadow was going along the wall, and then it was the mum that came in the door, and that kind of worked, and stuff like that.
But yeah, I mean, like you said though, like a lot of the creepier scenes are just like the more like quieter, more subdued stuff. Like just like one of the kind of earliest things on that I just like, real simple, but I don't know, I thought like kind of had a lot of like good like kind of dread and stuff to it, was like early on, like she goes to like put her like backpack on the shelf, and then like she walks away, and then you just kind of hear it like slide off, and then she looks and it's on the floor, and she goes and puts it back up, and then like it slides off again, and then again, like real simple.
Yeah, nothing scene, new here. This is really old school haunted house stuff.
But just like again, like just like the direction and the music and stuff is always like so well done that it kind of captivates you. Or like like a scene I really liked is when she's like doing laundry, and the like blanket or whatever like falls off the clothesline, and you're just kind of watching it like
she's got like a balcony, so she's hanging the sheet over the edge of the balcony to dry it, and it falls down. The way it flutters as it goes down from top.
It's just like cool. There's something about it, like again, just like the music and the direction of it all, just everything has this kind of creepy little undertone to it. Yeah, I think that might be when she kind of looks up and sees like the shadow in the room across the hall or something. That it's like, oh, it's.
Yeah, and she sees it's in the brother's room. She rushes in to help him, and there's nothing there. So it's like, yeah, okay. So I like that. So it is doing stuff throughout the movie that kind of sets up its twist, which is nice. It really does. As we said, the music's really good, and it's just really, it keeps coming back to it. And it did have that whole kind of vibe that I like, where it felt like they were trying to like do something about it. Like, even though our brothers and sisters don't really know why they're doing this. There's also the thing that she tries to get the brother to draw a symbol on the wall that'll help, and he turns the page to another symbol. It's like the symbol of invitation, and he's like, I'll draw this instead. This one looks prettier. And I'm like, damn it, you little shit.
And I like there's this like commercial playing throughout the movie that they like the little brother like sings along to, and then it's just like a simple like was like a soap commercial or something. And then like it's a nice callback to it at the end when they're trying to do like another seance kind of thing, and like, oh, like we need like some type of mantra or something, and like, oh, they just start singing that song. Yeah, it's kind of cute.
Yeah.
It was a catchy tune.
It works, and I think they also have one of those. I don't know what you call them. Is that kids game where it's the lights to light up and make the noise?
Oh, was that Simon? Is that it?
Is that what it's called? But here's what I thought. It's a fine little thing to use in a horror movie. It distracted me in this though, because it was featured so heavily in Paranormal Activity, the marked ones.
Yeah.
It was a big plot device in that movie. So even though here it's limited, it's only on one or two scenes, and it's just they use it for the lights to sort of light up the room in different colors. I was like, okay, but I saw this used heavily in another horror movie not that long ago, so it kind of, whatever. But so No, so I think the scary stuff's good, except when it's doing CGI stuff. I think one of the most effective ones actually is when she wakes up at night at one point, and like her dead dad's there, but he's like naked.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
you just look over and like she flashes the light and you just kind of see like the shape of him. You see just enough to know that he's naked, like full frontal nudity naked, but kind of in shadows. So it's kind of like, wait, is that like the naked dad? What's going on? But that was pretty creepy. That was a creepy thing. I almost wish it was always the dad instead of the shadow later on, because I think that made it feel a bit more tangible in a way.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, one of the creepiest things too is when she's talking to like her youngest brother, and he mentioned something like I forget what she says, like, oh, like who showed you that or told you that or whatever, or who you're playing with, and he's like, oh, like I was playing with that, and he's like,
it's the book. So he's got like a book out. It's like, who put this book out? It's like, Dad was reading it to me. I think that's what he said.
Yeah, he said like, oh, he's gonna come back and read to me again tonight, and it's like, oh, that's just like creepy.
And the fact is, I think if you want to read this as she was just losing her mind and she eventually killed herself at the end, I think you could read it that way, because I think one of the things that's happening is she's so her and her friend, who's like her best friend, and they're going to do this seance with the Ouija board earlier on because she wants to talk to her dad, and our friend invites this other third girl who wants to talk to her motorcyclist boyfriend who died, and they do the thing. Now later on, the girl Veronica kind of has this idea. She gets this idea that to stop this from happening, she needs to like do it again with the same three people. Talk to it again with the Ouija board and ask it to leave, and that's what it'll.
Yeah, because they messed up the first time because they were like interrupted and they didn't get to say goodbye and stuff. And then I think it's the nun, I think, that tells her like, oh, you have to do it again and correct your mistakes.
Yeah, and again with the nun, like it's sort of implied that maybe is she just imagining whatever the nun's saying to her? Because like when the other teacher comes up and gets her, she's like, oh, she's old and batty and she doesn't know what she's saying, and she seems more confused and stuff. But it's one of the things. This is that after that, the first Ouija board scene is her best friend's kind of standoffish with her. She's kind of scared of her for being weird, and she whispered something to her, which we later find out while she was kind of like quote unquote possessed. She whispered to her that she was going to die in like 3 days, which is at this point was today when we find out, and she feels like her best friend is drifting away, and she tries to talk to her, and it kind of feels like she's starting to go towards the third girl. Like she's starting to be more best friends with her, and she's like upset that her best friend has got a party at her house, but she didn't tell her about it. And like her and her other friend have like set it all up, and it feels like her friend's drifting. It feels like, again, because of her responsibilities with the kids, that her best friend, her social life is drifting away. And it's almost like when she goes to try and like get their help, says, "Oh, we the three of us need to do it again to like stop this thing." First, I don't believe her. They see her as being kind of crazy, and again, it's like she's literally shut out from her best friend's life. She's like, her best friend's like, "Hey, calm down," and her boyfriend or whatever comes up and just shuts the door in her face. And you could almost read it as that triggers the worst of it, because now that she's officially been shut out of her best friend's life and she doesn't have her life anymore, that's when the worst of stuff all happens that night. So you could almost read it that way if you wanted to. If you wanted to say,
Yeah, I mean, so much is going on. You can see her like be like, oh, maybe she's having like a mental break or something.
You can see that
between like,
and you can see that as being a trigger, and you could almost see that her mother. When the few times that she tries to bring it up to her mother that something's going on, and her mother's upset when she comes home, and I kind of like how like our first way to combat it is to have all the kids sleep in the living room together, like, get a couple of mattresses, because it felt like very slumber party, like get all your mattresses in the middle room and we'll all sleep together. But the few times that she brings it up with her mother, like her mother's just like disappointed. I was like, oh, I need your help. You need to like take the burden because I'm doing all this work. And when she brings it up again, it's like, oh, not this again. Like you could almost read it as a criticism of her mother not noticing that she's got some health issues, that mentally speaking. Yeah. Like her mother is like ignoring her daughter's mental health issues because she needs her to be helpful and be strong, but she's doing it at the expense of noticing that she needs help. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Like that's maybe what the film's kind of about, if you wanted to read it that way. But
I can definitely see that being the case.
Yeah, but I think the reason why that lands so much for me is at the end when the mother sees the police cars and the sirens and hears them, and she runs home out of the work. She runs around to her house and she sees her two daughters and she's like hugging them and like, oh, where's your sister, where's your brother, and like the horror in her face here, and then the horror as she sees her daughter on the stretcher as she's coming out the house, and she dies. Like we find out she dies before she even gets to the hospital, which happens as the the flame and the photo that the detective's looking at.
Oh right, yeah.
Which was maybe something that was also authentic. Maybe the police officer did see like the photo be on fire as he found out she died, and then the flame went out. Maybe that was like the other creepy thing that happened, like, that really happened, on the scene, if you will. But no, the horror of in her mother's face is like she sees her daughter be taken away. You almost feel the guilt and the blame like on herself. Like she was ignoring her. She was just writing it off as, oh, you're being a silly child and get over it now, rather than actually trying to help her. And I think that.
Yeah.
I think that's what maybe separates it from other like just ghost movies, is that there's actually some like real human drama going on that's kind of motivating it, which I kind of like.
Yeah, I mean that's like really where the strength of the movie lies. Just like great direction and atmosphere and characterization. Just again, unfortunately, something that you don't always see a lot of in modern horror movies.
It's funny because I think get into it thinking it's a possession movie, and then having the moment in the Ouija scene where she actually starts saying stuff. I'm like, okay, so it's going to be I was actually very relieved when it turned out not to just be a possession movie, at least in the traditional sense, because it was like, okay, it's not just going to be her in a bed like saying cryptic things for an hour as her mother tries to struggle to deal with what's going on. I like that it was a different approach. Like it made the possessed character the main character, and that question of, is she actually possessed or being manipulated, or is she just going nuts?
Yeah, you know what? That's actually that's an interesting point. I guess I didn't really think about it in terms of other possessed movies, but yeah, most like possessed movies, the possessed person like it kind of technically isn't the main character. Like it's usually about the people trying to cure her. Yeah,
the mother, the father, the brother, whoever person cares about them, the husband, wife, whoever's looking after them.
Usually like tied up or locked up or somewhere where they can't really roam around and do too much damage while other people try to figure out what to do. So yeah, it's cool to see something else.
Yeah, I honestly think that's the movie's biggest strength and why I like it as much as I do. So points on that.
So, yeah, I mean, and at this point, this I apologize, I don't know the director's name, but Wreck was amazing. I'm not sure.
I'm getting the info. What is it? Paco Plaza or Paco Plaza.
Okay, so yeah, I don't really know much else what he's done, but I mean, man, if you got like this and Wreck under your belt, like the guy's got some good clout.
Also, it's worth mentioning the actress who played Veronica, Sandra Escacena, if I'm pronouncing that right. This was her first movie, and the only other thing she has in her IMDb is like a short film that was after this. So she's like fresh talent.
Yeah, she was great. So
it's her movie. She is the center focus of the entire thing.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Yeah, so no, I'm curious. Interesting. This was the first film that Plaza did after Rec 3. He did not do 4, interestingly, but that's good. He did 1, 2, 3. So take that as a waiver. His next film that's in pre-production right now is called Eye for an Eye, so that'll be maybe one to look out for later this year or next year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be excited to see more about it.
Yeah, but no. So obviously, acting was pretty good. Honestly, the biggest failings are just a couple of the cliched things that it veers into at times, and sometimes instead of just being more subtle, it has the CG ghost character kind of running around and doing creepy things, which took me out of it because I'm like, okay, this isn't that creepy anymore. It's the human dramas and stuff and what that might be. But hey, so I think we're ready to unless you anything else you want to add, Timmy, about any particular scenes or moments that you think you're.
No, I mean I think we covered all the big ones.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's rate the whole movie then. So what would you give Veronica out of 10?
I mean, you're not wrong that there are some flaws, but I think they bother me a lot less than you. Like I think given like me being into the other stuff so much, like I'm willing to give that kind of stuff a pass. So I'm gonna give it a pretty high score, which I feel like we haven't been giving like super high stuff lately. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But
been a rough run, Tim. That's all it is.
Yeah. But I'm gonna give it an 8.5. Actually, I really, again, I just really liked it a lot. Yeah.
Honestly, I think I might even like it a little bit more now that we talked about it. And I was talking about, you know, all the family stuff and that she might just be crazy and like what everything represents. It does get a bit heavy-handed with the period stuff, as we mentioned. Even the way that when in the scene where the nurse, because she faints when, you know, the first Ouija thing, and she's at the nurse's office, and the nurse is asking questions like, have you done any drugs? Do you have diabetes? You know, she's asking all these questions, and she eventually gets to the are you on your period? And in the way she kind of awkwardly like sort of shakes her head implies, and she's like, oh wait, have you not started yet? And like it just like it's really like it really emphasizes really strongly this is a big deal. And it is, but like it just again subtlety is maybe what it's lacking there. But that said, though, talking everything else, I like it a bit more, even more than I did I think when I first finished it. So I'm going to say 7.5. It's so like I really want to give it the 8. It's so close to the 8. I don't know. It's just some of the horror scenes maybe just let it down a little bit for me, and I think that's why I can't quite do it. But it's so close to that 8. But 7.5. I'm giving it 7.5.
It's fair. So I mean, I think it looks like the trend, at least so far this year with newer movies, is like theater stuff hasn't been too great, but yeah, some of this like late last year stuff that's just getting to Netflix now has been pretty good.
That's true.
Yeah, this and The Ritual, like my 2 favorite movies of the year so far, and I guess it technically came out last year.
That is absolutely true. Hopefully things perk up, and when we get to stuff like A Quiet Place, and because obviously we're excited about that, and various other things throughout the year. Some stuff has been released at different times, so when we get to it, might be later than you may expect. But we've got a number of stuff coming out soon that we're going to be looking at. And as for the schedule, it does look like you'll be getting another episode next week, so you can look forward to that. And we will we'll see you then. So let us know what you think of Veronica if you've seen it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv. You can do that. There's a link in the description. Obviously, the vote for the patrons is up. The next vote is actually all Crypt movies. What is the Crypt? Our patrons can submit movies to a list called the Crypt, which is basically a list of suggestions for movies to do. And every so often, we'll pick one at random. Or we'll, in this case, we've picked all 4 of them for the vote, for the Patreon vote. So it's all 4 Crypt movies that are up for the vote. So it's a real mix and match. There's no like genre theme. There's no whatever. So you can go check out that. The winner of last month's vote was Audition, so you can expect that before the end of the month. So that's coming as well. So a lot of fun stuff coming up. So yeah. So once again, thank you for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Tim, say something insightful to the viewers or listeners.
Just if you're on that old Ouija, just make sure to say goodbye before you go, just like this podcast.
I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if I'm disappointed in what you just said, or if I'm like almost relieved it was as straightforward as that. I'm not sure.
You're relieved.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Set it straight. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we'll see you next time.